Welcome to the Talent Equation Podcast. If you are passionate about helping young people to unleash their potential and want to find ways to do that better, then you've come to the right place. The Talent Equation Podcast seeks to answer the important questions facing parents, coaches, and talent developers as they try to help young people become the best they can be. This is a series of unscripted, unpolished conversations between people at the razor's edge of the talent community who are prepared to share their knowledge, experiences, and challenges in an effort to help others get better faster. Listen, reflect, and don't forget to join the discussion at thetalentequation.co.uk. Enjoy the show.
Well, I'm here with Ken Martell from USA Field Hockey. Ken, welcome to the Talent Equation.
Great to be here, Stuart. And it's ice hockey, actually.
Exactly. I was just about to make that distinction, actually. It's not field hockey. Of course it isn't. It's ice hockey because I'm field hockey. Anyway, so, Ken, how are you doing? Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your background and,
sure.
What are you doing?
So, I guess go way back. Played ice hockey through university. Immediately upon graduating, knew I sort of wanted to go into coaching, and went on to a graduate degree program where I got to be a graduate student coach at the university level. Then transitioned to a full-time university coaching position. Coached at that level for about 10 years. Transitioned over to USA Hockey with our national teams, was a youth national team coach for 8-9 years. And then the last 11 years, I've been working with a variety of programs, whether it's our coach education program, our player development programs, have my hand in a little of everything, I think. So, that's what I've been up to for the last 30 years or so in coaching.
And you guys have been, obviously you had a fantastic success with the women in the recent Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something that you guys were expecting, or was it a bit of a bonus, a bit like our field hockey women's team?
No, we've won 7 out of the last 8 world championships.
Yeah.
So we've been on that trajectory. We've been doing very well. We just hadn't in the last 3 Olympics been able to pull it off. During the big event. And, so I don't think this was unexpected. I mean, there really is in our sport only 2 teams on the planet that have the same level of resources, the same talent level, the same player pool. So, it typically comes down to us and our neighbor to the north. So.
Yeah, I was watching the Olympics with great interest. I mean, you may or may not know about it, but I mean, I was watching the fact that the German team did so well, the men's team.
Oh, fantastic!
Wasn't it?
Yeah, no, that was great. It was a very different year for the Olympics on the men's side. Everybody didn't quite have access to their full player pool based on who was under National Hockey League contract.
Okay.
So you take 700 players or so off the top, and it becomes who's left over. And not that those aren't really good players, but what we've been used to in the past, that just access to player pool was a little different. But the Germans had a fantastic event. They played really, really well, and for us, we actually really love to see competition and have things spread around a little bit, see other countries have success, because that just makes us all better. Competition is good. It forces us to keep improving.
And I guess it, from my perspective as well, it kind of sort of created a bit more intrigue in the tournament itself. And so just as a pure neutral, it just was kind of nice to see some of the other nations really competing. I mean, particularly when Germany turned Canada over. I mean, that was unbelievable.
They're fantastic, yeah, for sure.
So tell me about your day-to-day, kind of what do you get up to for USA Hockey?
Oh, yeah, like I said, I have my hand in probably a little of everything that we do here, from little kids all the way up to the bigger boys. Develop coaching materials for our coaching program. I cover a geographic area for our staff where I'm out working with coaches on a more regular basis. Coach youth teams in my local youth association. So all things and everything, I guess, from a coaching side of the development of our athletes.
Okay, really. I mean, it's an interesting area, this whole coach development space. So, as you know, I'm heavily involved in that, sort of leading that from a policy standpoint, all the way down to actually doing it on a day-to-day basis as well, working directly with coaches. One of the things I'm really interested in is kind of, what do you see? What are the challenges? What are the issues that you face when you're trying to work with your coach workforce?
Well, we're a non-traditional sport, so to speak, in a lot of areas in our country. We've had huge expansion in a lot of our warm weather areas over the past few decades. Wherever the National Hockey League has moved into, there's new facilities that have popped up. Hockey tends to grow where there's some public interest, some media exposure. So we've grown from that perspective. We have a lot of youth coaches that are just the mom and dad, right, that show up, that are going to help out. And not a lot of them have a background in our sport. So it's, how do we help them just discover what it is that I do? I'm in a rush coming to the ice rink. I just got done with work. What am I going to do with these little 8-year-olds when we jump on the ice? And even for some of those coaches, that's a foreign environment. The coach can't skate, can't handle a puck. It's a bit of a challenge, but the idea is to try and provide them with some simple tools that maybe they can, and simple principles that they can apply and make the game enjoyable for our kids. We've had, you alluded to before, that we've kind of created this American development model program. Program's maybe a too structured word for it, but a bit of a framework to throw out for our coaches. Again, looking at how do we make the game fun for kids and give the game back a little bit to the kids. We've gotten so over prescriptive, I think, in what we do. Our youth sports culture in the United States is a little out of whack right now, across all sports. And I think this is why I'm lucky I'm here in Colorado Springs, so I get to communicate with a lot of our other NGBs and what it is that we're doing. And I think for a long time, we've all been working on our own little silos here. And we figured out not too long ago that the sports may be a little different, but kids are kids, and our issues tend to be more cultural than they are maybe sport specific. We all have the same problems, so to speak. And we've seen declining enrollment across all youth sports. So these are some of the impetuses for us to make change. And we've been able to do that now. We've been on this path for about 8 years. And just a recent statistic from the youth sporting goods industry, or from the sporting goods industry, says that, ice hockey's up 23% in participation.
Wow.
So I mean, we're fortunate as an NGB that our kids all register with us. It's an insurance registration because of ice facilities and those things, but we can track where our players are coming into the sport, which organizations are doing a good job of retaining kids, which jobs, or conversely, which programs are aggregating players from other associations and maybe not doing a good job of retaining their own players. But good data, good information, and we're seeing some good growth. So we know that if kids aren't having a good experience, there's certainly lots of options and lots of things for them to do. So, they vote with their feet, they walk away and go to another sport if they're not happy. So part of this is, creating a much better experience for the kids.
So would you put your growth down to is it you're attracting more people to the sport because people like what you're doing with the ADM, and they're kind of hearing what's going on, and they're sort of getting attracted that way? Or is it also about kind of retaining people, so you're not losing as many as you once were?
So yeah, no, clearly it's not losing as many as we used to. I mean, that's the goal. You go back to customer, looking at things from a customer perspective, it's always a lot easier to maybe retain a customer than it is to go out and find a new one. But we have done a good job, I think, with our programs in helping them recruit more kids to the sport. The National Hockey League's been a pretty good partner with us in that area as well. So when you're having help and maybe some resources from the highest level of our sport, that's always a bonus. But we can track retention, and we can track retention by club. So that's really what this is. Before we started, 60% of the kids were leaving our sport by the age of 11. And when you see this mass exodus, you're going, okay, well, they obviously are not enjoying themselves, not having a good experience. Our numbers have twisted around now to where a lot of our growth is through that retention side. We're almost 90% retention with kids that are 9 and 10 now.
Wow. So,
the growth starts to accelerate.
Wow. I mean, that's fun. I mean, that's a brilliant, I mean, that's a success story, surely. I mean,
it is. Yeah. We're very happy with that. And a lot of this is due to, the day-to-day coach, the day-to-day, what goes on at your local ice facility, those people are doing a tremendous job for us. They've taken some of the principles and are running with them.
Sorry, the ADM. Firstly, so a couple of questions here. So, firstly, what was the genesis of it, and then I'll ask the second question after that. So, tell me about that.
Well, I think so. We started at under 17, under 18 in 1996. We felt we needed to do something a little different, and we started a national team program for kids at that age because we saw a hole, I think, in what was going on. We have a very fractured development system here in the United States, which actually has some strengths to it, but there were some deficiencies. So we were taking our better players, centralizing them for the school year. And I can tell you I was there as one of the coaches in those early years, and we made a lot of mistakes because we hired professionals. We hired university coaches. We hired, National Hockey League coaches, people of that ilk to come in and now work with teenagers. And teenagers aren't adults. So we learned a lot about how to treat kids, how to, modify. So when you take a step back, again, I'm like everybody else. We got into the coaching business and we coached like we were coached, like a lot of your guests have said in the past. And made a lot of mistakes, and we evolved. We learned a lot of different lessons, and after a while, we kind of figured out, okay, well, if this is if we've learned these lessons and we're not doing the right things for 16 and 17-year-olds, and we've learned to maybe do some things better, I think our organization looked at it as maybe an analogy would be like the Ford Motor Company having a race division, and you learn how to make the car go really fast. And by the way, there's some things that are really simple that we should be taking back into our production model, so to speak, right? So how do we share what we're learning about dealing with kids and start to share that at those same age groups, that aren't quite in that same national team selection process? So that was the genesis. And then when we start doing a real critical analysis of our sport and how it was being delivered, we found out, oh boy, what's really broken is what's going on with 8U, 10U, 12U little kids, because they're trying to replicate what goes on with 18-year-olds, right? So this was where this whole thing started. We just knew we were broken, didn't necessarily have all the answers for sure. We still don't. I mean, you know how the process goes. We're learning new things all the time, and we're trying to get better at working with kids, and really we're just committed to doing the best job we can for them. And we know as coaches we make mistakes along the way, but as long as we acknowledge those mistakes and are willing to make change and keep adapting, that's how this all started.
And so The second part of the question I was going to ask was around, I mean, I know like any organization that tries to bring about change, and I've been involved in a number of them in my career, I imagine it hasn't been universally popular or universally accepted. And I'm interested in just kind of what the journey's been like.
Sure. It's interesting. Some of our staff, we were just at PGA of America this week, and they're going through a change process, looking at the numbers and the retention and those things that are going on in our sport. And they're saying, well, maybe how can we replicate a few of those things in golf, because the golf industry is losing membership, golf course closing, those things. So, we went in to basically show them our battle scars and, how this has all gone down. And like I said, we're 8-9 years into this, and there's still pockets in our country that aren't quite up to speed or where we would like to see them. And Canada right now is going through the same process. I mean, one of the first things we did was just change the competition structure for 8-year-olds and 6-year-olds. That, I mean, obviously sounds ludicrous that we're going to play with 6-year-olds on the same size ice surface that we're going to play with our adults, right? But that was going on. So some of these really simple logical changes, that's not real hockey. That's baby hockey. The same kind of pushback you get when you try and make change. And our staff figured out real quick that it really wasn't about hockey. It was about change, right? So we had to become change experts, I guess, or on the fly, moving around the country trying to facilitate these changes. But, just very simple things, reduce the playing surface size. that was and still is a little bit of a battle in pockets around the country.
I think I've seen, I don't know whether you guys produce them or not, but I saw some brilliant stuff like videos of adults playing on the same size surface in equivalent terms.
And that was such a fun project, because all we did was, based on the size of an 8-year-old, scale up the ice rink accordingly. Yeah. Then add an adult sort of pond hockey tournament that we run, USA Hockey holds annually. We just threw adults on the rink and then stuck a microphone in their face and said, "Tell us what you think." And they came up with every answer you would like to have them say, without any prompting, because it just makes too much sense, right? And so it was fun to watch them go through this process. It was a great experience.
Yeah. Well, I owe you a debt, because I've used that video myself a few times in presentations. It just really brings it home to people, I think.
Well, and we've been fortunate too, because we've had help from other organizations create similar types of materials that I think a lot of times we've found that when we bring in the outside person from a different sport, it disarms the room a little bit, because, well, we've taken hockey out of the equation. So automatically the hair on your back doesn't stand up. You don't get too offended, and maybe you can take a step back and look at things a little bit more critically. And we've been able to use the same type of things from U.S. tennis and others that have produced some great stuff. So we look at it as a sport body, we certainly compete against other hockey playing nations, but where we can share, I mean, we're all in this together a little bit for our kids, right? I mean, I don't care what sport kids go play. They go out, have a passion, play and enjoy and be physically active. And, we sit back and we say there's 30-something million kids in the United States that aren't involved right now in youth sport.
Yeah.
And are they getting enough physical activity? So, we're not worried about competing. We're looking at this as a societal problem, and how do we help? So anytime we can share or be a part of, help someone else create solutions, we're certainly willing to do that.
I mean, I think that's been one of the fantastic legacies of, I imagine you guys are all bought into Project Play. Is that right?
Yes, we were there from the beginning. Tom Ferry's been fantastic with us. I think, so when he was originally working for ESPN, he did an article in the ESPN Kids issue on one of our early adopting clubs that jumped on board with our ADM. And it's actually a pretty interesting story, because now you look back, and this was a local community program, more or less, not one of the aggregating clubs that you see out there. And 3 of those kids from the same team at those younger ages are in our national team player pool right now. Right? So some of this isn't rocket science. Just do some good things for the kids and give them a little more freedom, let them make some decisions, and bring some joy back to maybe what we do, and look out at what they're capable of. Right?
It's really pertinent. I mean, there's been a thing raging on Twitter over here at the moment. So the England Rugby, who I used to work for, when I was there, we did quite a bit of work changing the kind of like the youth competition structure. Mm-hmm. We'd done quite a bit of work on structuring the environment, but what we hadn't done is the competition stuff. And so what we found was that, people were brought in to sort of play in a different set of rules, but they were still acting like maniacs. So we kind of changed some of the competitive structure, because by changing the competitive structure, you did change the behavior of people on the sidelines, coaches, spectators, etc. And there's been this debate raging on, stimulated by a journalist who, one of our BBC journalists, who kind of questioned the value of this. And it's literally been raging and raging for what seems like 3 or 4, maybe about a week and a half now. And and it's quite interesting. It's like plutonium when you touch youth sport. You change competition structure or anything like that, and people go crazy. And it's like it's like Brexit. For here, the argument is so polarized, it's one side or the other, and it's like people just, unbelievable. So I kind of really, you've been at this, like you say, nearly a decade, so you've got all the battle scars, as you say.
And we continue to modify our rules. I mean, we actually just made some changes within the last year or so for our younger age groups, and we're a sport that. This is kind of crazy, but at the National Hockey League, or traditionally, when your team takes a penalty, you lose a player from the ice surface. Mm-hmm. But we're going to change the rules of play so that the offending team can now just grab the puck and throw it all the way down to the other end of the rink to relieve pressure. And I guess it's a rule that came on board in the 1950s when the Montreal Canadiens were too good on the power play, so the National Hockey League said, well, we got to level the playing field here, so they threw this rule in, and it stuck for all these years. Well, no one's around since back then to remember, and this is the way the game has been played. So we've said, well, why do we give kids an opportunity, or give the coaches and the parents an opportunity to yell at their kids from the sidelines of the stands and say, just throw it away. Like, what kid instinctively wants to just throw the puck away, right?
Yeah.
And why do we have rules in place that encourage them to not make decisions?
Yeah.
So we've said, okay, well, the rule's the same. We're not, whether you're penalized or unpenalized, we're just going to play the same way. You can't throw the puck. Can't throw the puck all the way down. If you do, it's just a whistle and play comes back to your end.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So we as a national governing body are like, why are we incentivizing poor decision making?
Yeah.
Or at least the opportunity to make good decisions. And now what you see is the shorthanded team, so to speak, scoring more goals, making more plays, and kids adapt really quick.
Yeah.
Well, these are the type of structures that if we can make rule changes that to facilitate their development and encourage them to hang on to the puck a little bit more, make plays, then, well, we should do that. And, when they get older, well, okay, go back to playing against rules that are the same adult rules that are in place when you become an adult.
This is the thing, though, isn't it? Is I just don't get why people insist that the youth game has to be exactly the same as the adult game.
Oh, yeah.
When we changed the rules in rugby, a colleague of mine, before I joined, actually had done a lot of the research into this, and they were playing the adult game, and because the adult game's so complex, the ball would just get stuck in an area forever. And there's all this game time being lost, opportunities to play. So let's get rid of that. We're not going to do that bit. We're just going to keep the other bits. And you've ruined the very fabric of the game. And it's like, never quite understood why people are more than happy to have innovation at the elite end. I mean, it's more, all the time, but you can't do it with kids sport for some reason.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and the good news for us is the people at our elite end of the sport, they look at what we're doing and they go like, well, that makes great sense. Fantastic. We need more players that can think and make a play under pressure. And okay, let's put them in that environment. Let them be exposed to that environment at an early age. It's great.
Yeah. So one of the reasons we sort of got together is you had a couple of questions for me, or a few areas that you wanted to explore with me. So it's kind of time to turn the tables a little bit and kind of let you sort of ask me, and we can have a bit of a coaching jam session and come up with some ideas live here on the podcast.
Yeah, I hope so. So I mean, our sports are very similar, obviously, invasion sports, right? Yeah. And what makes us different than maybe some of the others is we're implementing. We have a stick in our hands and we're manipulating some object at the end of that, which does change some of the dynamic. One of the things that we have to be concerned with in our sport, though, is some mobility issues, right? And the conversation we wanted to get into a little bit was on chasing games and those things. So we, in our sport, we're playing on a completely different playing surface.
Yeah.
So the transportation skills, locomotion skills are a little different. Yeah. So for us, even when we do a lot of tagging games and those things for our skating skill development. Yeah. So what I'm looking really at is more ways to, provide that action perception coupling that goes on that we need, but scaling the process a little bit so that kids can actually work on some of their technical skills. From the elite end, we've been playing small games and those things, small-sided games, for quite a while.
Yeah.
And I actually did want to bring this up. It's a little off that topic, but it was at the Motor Skill Acquisition Conference in Finland here in November that some of your other colleagues and guests were at. And,
wow. Yeah.
One of your colleagues, Danny Newcomb, had a slide that he threw up, and it was this little evolutionary slide on with small games, right? Early on in that whole process. And that for me was fantastic simply because it's the same way we're looking at things. We've had good acceptance of small-sided games in our culture, but our coaches don't really think about what are we doing in those games, and they just go out and let the kids play. And sometimes they can be too open where the kids aren't directed enough. We're not focusing where they're getting enough maybe repetition on some of the more desired focus that we're trying to implement in our practice, or what we would like to see them focus on in their learning. And we've had good results with our kids that are of a certain skill set. We've seen them really take off in those environments because they have the tool set to maybe be able to excel and adapt more readily. But when we back off and we come down to the kids who don't have maybe the right set of puck control skills or confidence with the puck, to be able to have their head up and perceive what is going on around them, it's this scaling within this environment to where they get a chance to work on those puck control skills with some of the right perceptions that they need, right? So, we do some of the same follow the leader type of things where everyone's got a puck, and that certainly helps with the control. But again, looking for more ways to you had talked a little bit about what did you call it? Dogfight. Yeah. And we'll run right out and try that with our kids. And the encouragement to look over your shoulder now is more prevalent. You see that right away with the kids. So that's fantastic. You find those little nuggets that certainly then put the kids in an environment where that environment is encouraging them to do good things. We're going to help them. So that more awareness with the puck on their stick and the right awareness. So what are those perceptual cues that they're going to have to solve in a real game? We don't want to get sometimes too far away from that. right? So I think that's the discussion area that I'm looking at. And you're a sport that very similar. We both have to manipulate that puck. So some of the tagging games and some of those things, well, if I've got two hands on my stick, it becomes a little harder, right, to tag if I have a ball on my stick. So I thought that was an incredibly clever way to do it, you know?
Yeah. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because that's one of the things that I think people have often said to me is, you know, how do they learn to manipulate the ball? How do they learn to, be able to sort of move the ball? And traditionally, the way we would have done it, I imagine, is, you know, we would put some cones down and dribble around them. And then, weirdly enough, you know, then those same coaches would then criticize the players for not having their heads up.
Right.
Well, yeah, there's a reason why your head's down, because you've
absolutely
to focus on.
That's all you've been practicing.
Yeah. So we want to try as much as possible to get the ball manipulation to be based on an individual in front of you. So, and you want to develop ball manipulation in response to something else, don't you? So you want to see that perception action coupling. So it's not just about a kind of pre-planned set of moves. What it's about is I need to move because that person's moved. Now you can either do it two ways, can't you? You can either do it because you're trying to evade somebody, or you could do it because you're trying to follow them. Now, ordinarily in the game, you're usually trying to evade somebody. So the other way of flipping dogfight around is, well, one of the ways of doing it is that I've done it in the past where you're chasing and looking over your shoulder, but you can do it face on. So it's like it's chicken. A bit like chicken. It's not chicken, but it's a bit like it. Because the thing about chicken is, so in ice hockey, you can use both sides of the stick.
Yes.
So you can carry the ball on either side, yeah?
Yes.
So in field hockey, you can do the same thing, but the traditional model is that you carry the ball on one side of the body, only the right-hand side of the body. Yep. And the reason they set that up originally, I think, was a safety thing, so you don't go body on body. You go stick to stick. But anyway, so if you do play chicken and they decide to go at the same time to the same direction, you end up just then crashing into each other. But it's almost like, it's not chicken, but it's like a face-to-face chasing game.
Sure.
So I've done it before where I actually do create a shape with... and I only ever use cones for space and shapes. I don't ever use it for anything else. People think I'm anti-cone, by the way. I'm not anti-cone, for marking space. And I let the kids create their own shape with the set. You know, they'll have a set number. They can create their own shape. They can create a diamond, they can create whatever they like. And then they basically chase each other around the shape. But based on the other, and they both have a ball. So one of them's the chaser, one of them's the tagger, but they can only tag them with the ball and they're face onto each other. So if one moves one way, the other one's got to move the other way. If one moves one way, the other one's got to move the other way.
Yeah.
So it's a bit more realistic to the evasion idea. So instead of chasing, reacting to their movement and following, you're doing the opposite of what they do. And if they then change direction and go back the other way, you've got to change direction and go back the other way. And I just find that they can play that game for really quite a long time.
Yeah. No. Again, the play aspect is so important too, you know, and that's we work so hard to try and get away from the drill aspect of what it is we're doing. How do we make this competitive, or how do we make this something where the kids, again, there's the element of play and that they enjoy a bit of what they do. So, you know, we've done something similar. We just put a net as an obstacle in the middle, and just say, okay, well, you know, if your buddy goes one way, then you go the other. Yeah. So, and chase him around. So very similar.
So the other thing sorry, go on.
Well, some of the other things that we've done, and this is maybe a compromise in some respects to some of the other folks that haven't quite gotten over the hurdle a little bit with some of the drills. But what we do is we might put up 4 tires. Yeah. And we would say, okay, first one to get through the tires, two players are going to go at the same time. First one to get through gets to go shoot on goal. Yeah. But you pick 3. Yeah. So now there's going to be some confrontation because we're going to cross over someplace. Yeah. And in our sport, being able to, we are a contact collision game, even though we've taken out the full body checking for our younger players. Yeah. We still allow them to bump into each other and, muscle their way a little bit into that space, right? So if we can cut somebody off. So these are that little setup, then, they're turning but there's conflict. And I have to try and either how do I get through that conflict? I have to avoid that opponent a little bit, or actually run them out of the way so that I have my clear path to the goal.
Yeah. I like that idea. So along, I guess, similar lines, we do quite a lot of similar things. And interestingly with that, again, you mentioned the use of tires, and some people, as a kind of an obstacle. So some people would say to me, or what I might consider to be purists might say, oh yeah, but you've got these kind of set obstacles. Well, in my mind, sometimes you do want to reduce the variability down, and you don't want to have to. So there's enough for them to contend with the fact that they're going to race against somebody else. They've got to kind of either avoid them or kind of nudge them or whatever, then they've got to try and get a goal. So it's still a really good game, and it's still fun. So I don't necessarily see that there's an enormous problem with that. The only bit I don't like, the only bit I would try and avoid if I can, is minimize the queuing. So do you have a bit of?
No. Well, and I think that's one of the other things that we've done with just the general principle of our ADM is, look, no lines, no laps, no lectures here. Like let's get to it. Yeah. And we would do that in groups of maybe 4 kids, where 2 have gone, they're coming back around, the other 2 are going, and
great.
Just waiting for the kids just to come back to restart and keep going. It's how do we make things more manageable? The other thing that, from a sport perspective, and this is coming away from our conversation a little bit, but ice time is very expensive in our sport. It's a multi-million-dollar facility that's paying an electric bill and everything else, and there are places in our country where ice is $500 an hour.
Whoa! So
for us, it's okay. How do we use that resource more effectively? Maybe put a few more kids on the rink than we were, to break that cost up for families. Work in some smaller areas for some things that we need to, and just plan a little bit accordingly. But keep the cues to nothing. It's
one of those things that I see quite a lot when I'm going around working with different coaches, is like the whole cues thing. I mean, look, I know it's sometimes difficult, particularly when you've got numbers, but that's where I kind of adapt in a different direction. What you say there, though, is fascinating, because it's exactly the same in field hockey. In general, people are hiring a pitch, and it's not $500, but it's going to be between $50 to £100 an hour. Or thereabouts. It's still expensive, exactly. It's a significant cost. And I see the kids doing laps, warming up, and I'm like, you haven't started. You're 15 minutes in. That's cost you £30, whatever it is. It just doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, and to be honest, like, how many muscle pulls have you seen with kids at recess? I mean,
exactly.
It's just the recess warm up. Like, hey, let's go play.
Yeah, no, you don't see them, do you? With you don't see them just warming up and doing the stretches, and I love this, by the way. I don't know whether you have the same. You probably don't have the same on ice, but we do. You know how these warm up trends happen.
Oh yeah.
So you've got all these so-called dynamic stretches that apparently are supposed to be much better for you now, and you've got what I call shoeing the chickens. So there's open the gate with your leg, open the gate, shoe the chicken, kick the donkey, close the gate. I watch it all and just go. I mean, literally, I see 8-year-olds doing it at festivals and just think, what are you doing? I know you think you're doing the right thing, but just give them a ball and let them have a go.
Well, the good news for us is that's, if they're going to do it, that's being done off the ice.
Off the ice, yeah.
Beforehand, and then, quickly, here we go, get going. So, but there are still the old traditionalists that's going to go on the ice, and they're going to static stretches on the ice. I mean,
So just talking about something that occurred to me earlier when you were talking was about this idea of developing skating skills without a stick and a puck.
Yeah. Well, no, we start off a little bit with some tagging games and those things. The abject beginner, it's, again, we've got to reduce the variability a little bit somehow so that they can get some stuff done. So we're going to, and some of the tagging games, again, if we can match kids of similar mobility, tag works well. If they can't, and I can always get you and you can never get me, not too much fun. But we'll put some things in where, very, very simple where maybe we just draw a line down the middle of the playing area, and on this side you have to skate forward, to this side you have to skate backwards.
Yeah.
Right. So they're going to go back and forth to evade, and then they got to switch, pivot, turn.
Yeah.
And they get all these repetitions in, but with a puck at the same time, is almost impossible for them.
Oh, okay. There's too much to think about.
There's just too much going on. They can't do both.
Yeah.
And now, as soon as possible, though, we're going to put the puck on their stick, because that's the game they got to be able to do.
Yeah.
Both, but it's that entry level, mobility that is the quarter inch piece of steel, slippery, all get up. It is, and skating is not a quote natural, movement form for us as human beings. There's a bit of an adaptation to it.
That's the difference in the dynamics of the game, isn't it? Is that, most of the kids who come to me can stand up.
That's right.
Most of them can run. Most of them can kind of move. So therefore, that's just not really an element that you have to consider. Yeah. Whereas your kids, they can't stand up, some of them, and so you can't really play if you can't stand up.
That's right.
Yeah. Of course. And by the way, as somebody who is abject at skating, I totally get that. My feet don't work properly. I was born with a slight disability, so they don't kind of work properly to make me skate. I've been with my kids recently, and they're all flying around me, and I'm just going, I can't do this. I got to get off. I just feel too bad.
They adapt quick.
They do. Do you know what? It's absolutely it's one of those things that I really hate, because I would love to play ice hockey. It's like be the best game in the world. I play the land version. They call it floorball.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic.
And I love it. I love using both sides. I love playing with a puck. I love being able to get that thing flying. But put me on ice, I am a disaster area. So I totally get where they're coming from. Something else that occurred to me as a game as well is I mentioned the game I was playing earlier on, which is the kind of face-on-face chicken game. I sometimes play that where the obstacle is another player. So that player can move anywhere in a given area. So not only do they have to attend to what their opponent who's chasing them is doing, they have to attend to the person in front of them who's also moving, who's being the obstacle. So if they move one way and then that person can run straight at them, they've got to dodge around and get around them. So it creates an extra layer of complexity. Instead of having a fixed obstacle, there is a moving obstacle. Sure.
We've done other things too. It's a complicated, and again, it starts to move away from maybe the invasion game side of things, so that oncoming perception of someone trying to attack me, but just getting them a little bit more aware of their surroundings, where we might say, okay, pick two teammates, don't tell them who you've got, and we want you to try and handle the puck, stay equal distant from those two teammates wherever they go. But this is a mass blob of kids, so it's constantly moving, and I'm continually having to keep track of players that are, around me, behind me, in front of me, where I move, just so that they're forced more to look around and maybe actually pull in information from a distance. And again, not a real problem from what we're solving in the game, but the kids seem to have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
One of the things for us is there's a safety side to all this.
Sure.
Right? Because there is body checking, right? So if I can't carry the puck going down the ice and have awareness of who's around me, coming from different angles, coming to get me, that's a problem.
So my version of that, the way I manage the variability of that in that game, is there's a famous schoolyard game, which in this day and age has been sadly banned from many of our schools, called Bulldog.
Okay.
So basically,
we do something a little similar, I think. Sharks and minnows for us.
Yeah. So they've got to get from one side to the other, and then there's somebody in the middle who's basically, traditionally when I was at school, you used to literally physically get tackled. You'd come in from lunchtime and you'd be covered in mud. So it's probably the reason they banned it. But great fun. So we played a similar version, but me as the coach, I'm the tackler. And so I can manage the intensity of the tackle. And usually I just kind of stand there with my stick down and they have to dodge around me. And if they don't dodge around me, they hit me. And then some of them join me and then they become the tacklers and some of them then join. So it's kind of a way of managing the flow of people. So there's a lot of variability and a lot of, but what's really interesting is noticing how they start to go to space. So needless to say, they all start to congregate towards the extremities.
Yes.
Because that's where the less people are. So interesting, when we go into a game, I'll quite often say, okay, so we're going to play this, but we're going to play it like Bulldog. And so they all start thinking about using the sides instead of the middle, because normally they just pile through the middle. So, it's kind of an interesting dynamic of a game. And by manipulating the space, so you can play it in a very big, wide area or a very narrow and tight area, and with multiple numbers, it's actually a great kind of dribbling, tackling game.
Mm-hmm.
And it just helps them to learn to move. So it's not a chase game, but it's still a perception action coupling game because there's still a defender to beat. Yeah.
No, and it is that. I mean, that's a common situation in basic, because I have to get by an opponent to the space behind them so that I can maybe attack the goal.
Yeah.
And that person is coming at me trying to disrupt my play or take the ball from me.
And then the other one is a similar version, but it's I don't know why I call it this, but it's basically a game I played when I was growing up. I lived abroad in Papua New Guinea, and there's a load of Filipino expat kids there, and they had this game called Water, played on a badminton court, where certain defenders could move in certain areas, and you kind of had to dodge them.
Mm-hmm.
But they could only move on a certain line. I don't limit it in that way, but I do create boxes where there's sort of defenders in. So you're kind of waiting. There's multiple kids going, and they kind of wait to see if the defender goes for someone else, and then they can jump through. And you're constantly having to look to see where the defender's going to move to, and if they're going to come and get you, and you can dodge through, and then they switch over. So it's like usually a game played, say, 6v6 in quite a small area. And you have 6 defenders locked in zones, and they have to try and get as many of their players through as they can. And the more players they get through, the more points they get, and then they come back the other way. So that's another version of a similar game.
Oh, that's fantastic, yeah.
Do you ever play King of the Ring?
King of the Ring?
Yeah.
So
you probably do, but I'll describe it.
Probably with a different name, but
So King of the Ring is basically you're in a space, whatever the space is, and you have however many children you've got. They've all got a puck or a ball, and the job is to keep your puck and get somebody else's puck out. Yeah.
Yes.
And and it's the last man standing is the King of the Ring,
yes.
or the what do we call it? What's the girls' version? Queen of the something. I can't remember what they called it, but yeah. So last person standing, whatever it is. I usually have the last boy, the last girl, and then they become then they go in. So 2 versions of that. One is where you've got your own puck and you knock people out, or there's everybody with a puck and 2 chasers.
Yeah.
And once you knock somebody out, they become a chaser, and it's whoever's left.
Yeah, we do similar variations of the same thing. Yeah, for sure.
I figured you would. I mean, they're fairly standard sort of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what I then do with those, and I don't know whether you've gone down this route as well, is that I start to put other constraints on those games.
Mm-hmm.
So as with any of these things, you've got you've got an initial basis of a game, and then you can just start to manipulate the constraints.
For sure.
So one of them is obviously manipulating the space that they can play within and the space they can move within. The other one, though, is I start to change the way that they can move with the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I might say you're not allowed to use the reverse side of your stick. You can only use the open side of your stick, and just change the way that they move with the ball and those sorts of things, and the way that they can dodge and the way that they can protect the ball and all those sorts of things.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, just bringing in different task-related rules and just seeing how they can manipulate. Or you can only play with one hand on the stick, right hand, left hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do the same type of things.
Yeah.
But again, it's fascinating to watch where different kids are at different stages within their abilities within those same games, and then figuring out, how am I going to help these 3 kids that can't quite do those same things as everybody else? How do I bring them along a little bit, other than putting them back in? I think through experimentation, I'm not sure if experimentation is probably the right thing. I mean, with our ethics committee, making experiments on kids, but we've done different things where we've played with high school age kids. A colleague and I, we said, okay, the entire season, all we're going to do is small games, and maybe not going back into this context of where they're allowed to develop those technical skills, but play those small games. And we see some of our better players getting better. And now it's, how am I going to manage kids that aren't quite as good? We don't want them left behind. We need to maybe modify what it is, or change rules that are going to allow them to compete with everybody else. They get maybe some advantages. And these are the things that, sometimes they dawn on you and sometimes they don't. And as coaches, you sometimes feel like you're letting down your players if you can't figure out how to maybe help them all, right?
Yeah.
And I think these are the things that getting our youth coaches to understand that it's that, well, when do I make changes? When do I not make changes? How do I modify what we're doing so that all the kids can participate? Right? This is the difficulty that we're finding now out in the field when we're doing our coach education, or just work with individuals and ask them questions about how they're coaching and trying to help. This is where our challenges are right now. It's not in the get them to play small games, or they see value in that. They see similarities to the sport in that. But it's in really watching what's happening in those situations and finding the tweaks to what it is that we do that can help out the individual kid versus just the entire group. Because you see it all the time where coaches tend to coach to the group and not look at the individual kids that are in the group.
And I think that's a unique challenge for team games, isn't it? Because you have different individuals with different stages of development, and you have to try and include them. I mean, it's one of the reasons why, certainly when I was England Rugby, I was trying to challenge to say we shouldn't be slaves to age groups just because that's the needs of competition. We should also be considering kind of, training age and the stage of development. So you very often get, young people who are very new to the sport and they join a group in the same age group with their friends and peers. And I get that, but they're 3 years behind in terms of their abilities to play. And it's very difficult to include them meaningfully. And so I've often said you almost need, it's not very good radio, me pointing and visualizing this, but in the same way we've got this kind of this sort of linear progression through the age groups that does have a degree of linearity to it. We need a kind of horizontal version coming in from the sides, so they have the same developmental opportunities. They might have to be accelerated to a certain extent to try and then bring them up a little bit up to speed, but it's not an easy task.
No.
In terms of differentiation, just something I just thought about there is it's not out yet, but I just did a really interesting podcast recording with a lady called Amy Price, who's a young football coach. And she's her PhD is all about video games and what we can learn from video games in our coaching. Really fascinating discussion we had. And one of the things she does is actually, I think there's something in video games that we can use to help us with differentiation. So one of the things that she does, for example, is she gives certain players superpowers. Or like bonus powers, power up if you like in a video game.
Yeah, for sure.
So for example, if you have a player that's got less ability, they're less experienced as others, and maybe their ability to carry the ball isn't as effective as somebody else's, then their superpower is, for example, that they get 3 seconds without being able to be tackled. Now, if they're smart, they can use that 3 seconds. They probably need the 3 seconds to get the puck under control, to carry it, maybe find another pass. That's just giving them extra time, right? But if they're smart about it, like some of the kids, like, you go stand in the goal mouth, and they get the ball to the puck to them, and it's like, it can't be touched for 3 seconds. Oh my God. So it's like, there's you have to maybe manipulate the control. But it's quite a clever idea as using superpowers. So it's like to the individuals, it doesn't feel like they're being given kind of special treatment. They're being given a superpower.
That's right.
And I quite like that. I haven't actually used it myself yet, but I like it as a method for differentiation.
That sounds fantastic. Yeah. We got to find ways that kids don't feel left out, or that they feel maybe excluded, or, that's brilliant.
And then the other one, I suppose, we all do this, don't we, is with a quite a large mixed ability group, I always pretty much create my teams that have got a rough balance of,
for sure.
Particularly if it's a 2v2, experienced player, less experienced player. And it is actually really interesting to see the accelerated development in the less experienced player.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the balance of that, of course, is that you still want to create enough stretch for the more experienced player. So you do want to manipulate it appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely have, in every session, there will always be a mixed ability element whereby, and I try and be quite careful about my teams to make sure I've got some balance. And then we may go to another period where I might put some of the more experienced players together with some of the less experienced players so that there's a nice balance from a competitive opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. We try and do the same things with our kids. Or even find ways, to bring that better player, in an environment where maybe they have to play against two opponents or whatever it is, so that they're challenged every once in a while. So there's that variability throughout your practice. And we do a lot of 2 against 2 as well. I mean, we think that's really the basis for us in our sport, right? Yeah. And in a variety of different ways, enough variability, but not too much.
Yeah.
So they can problem solve and learn space and how to support. And there's some really great things with that. So.
I think you're right. I mean, I think with a 2v2 as well, the value of a 2v2 for me is the opportunity to go, you've got an opportunity to pass, an opportunity to carry. Mm-hmm. And in a 2v2, you're likely to have 2v1s. You're likely to have 1v1s. You get everything in a 2v2.
You get everything.
Yeah.
Well, and for us as a sport too, I mean, and I don't know some of the numbers, for example, in field hockey, but the puck turns over 200 times in a hockey game.
Yeah.
So that transition from puck carrier to offensive support player to defensive player at the puck to defensive support player, and that interchangeability between those roles, really important. And we try and get our coaches to look at the sport not from a positional perspective, but in those different roles and different skill sets that go along with each of those. And everybody has to have all of those. Mm-hmm. And then how fast can we switch between those roles? And 2v2 allows us to cover all our bases with it.
Field hockey's exactly the same. I think the ball's in transition 70-80% of the time.
Okay.
I mean, there are periods where it's in an extended possession, usually at the back, where the defenders, for some reason, are just passing the ball back and forward to each other just because they think they can. But in general, it's a counter-attack game. But interestingly, the amount of sessions I see where the attackers have a go, and then the defenders win the ball, and then the practice stops, and we start again.
Oh.
So one-directional practice is just everywhere.
No. I mean, I think, yeah. Always have to be that once you steal it, what are you doing with it? Like that's
somewhere, yeah.
A big chunk of our sport. So we even try and design a lot of our drills and games and things where it's all about what happens after that change of possession, that turnover.
Yeah.
Where are we going?
Take advantage of. I describe that as just taking advantage of a very short window of potential numerical superiority.
That's right.
Yeah.
Same principles, obviously, for invasion sports.
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting thing, I think, for me, this whole area around how we develop movements. I mean, funnily enough, I was having a really good, deep, very strange conversation. I was playing golf with a friend of mine yesterday, and it rained, really badly rained. So I'm not very. I don't play golf in the rain. I don't even play hockey in the rain. No, I do. But anyway, so we came in, had a coffee, we were sitting there chatting away. He's an ex-pro basketballer.
Okay.
So he started, for some reason, he just was kind of warming himself up by kind of doing some basketball footwork drills. We ended up having this massive debate about, he had this idea, if you can't do this footwork and you can't do a jump stop and you can't do this, you can't play basketball. And we said, yeah, okay, fine, but how do you develop that? He says, well, I just want them to rehearse the drill, just do it until they get used to it, and then we do that. I said, okay, but here's the problem. What happens if I step in here and then I get in the way? You can't do that movement, you've got to do something else. oh yeah, but you got to have this movement. You got to have this movement. And we had this raging debate about it. And I said, wouldn't it be better to learn this with a defender there? Oh, but they're not going to be able to. If they haven't got these fundamentals, they can't do this sort of thing. It's just interesting. I wonder whether you come up against that when you're out there speaking with coaches.
Oh, for sure.
Fundamentals idea.
Well, I think it goes back to just a general, and we have a problem right now in our sport because there's skills coaches that have popped up all over the place. And what skills are they teaching? Well, it's these blocked, we're going to go around some cones, and it's what do our parents and youth coaches perceive as skill, right? It's how you define it. And for us, the definition of skill is being able to react to the game, execute in the game whatever problem that the game presents to you.
Yeah.
And yet we don't practice things that way, right?
Yeah.
So for us, that is one of our challenges right now when we're going around working with coaches, and we do get in the same debate, right? But yet then you watch our players, and they never seem to solve their problems in the competition. Like it's all of a sudden it's one hand on my stick that's tapped the puck, but it's not this same movement pattern that we're practicing going around these cones. Right?
So what you've made me think of is the penalty. I can't remember her name. The girl in the final of the Olympic final.
Yeah, one of the Lamoureux sisters. Yeah,
unbelievable skill. But she worked that out on the fly. That wasn't a pre-planned thing.
Oh no, it actually was.
Was it?
Yeah, and there was some discussion about her. She even has a name for it.
Okay.
Which is a little, okay. But, I watch some of our other great players do their penalty shots, and you talk to them, and they'll tell you, no, I'm actually, I don't know, I maybe an idea of what I'm going to do, but I'm reading that goaltender to say, well, can this be done? What can I do? How can I manipulate that goaltender?
Yeah.
I got a great story about that penalty shot. So the under-20 World Championships gold medal game a year ago came down to penalty shots. And we had a player, Troy Terry, who he shot the puck in previous penalty shots like 5 straight times between the goaltender's legs. Right? That way he'd come in and he did it from different angles. And in that moment, gold medal game, it's on the line. He can win it, right? With this, so to speak. And he comes in and he's thinking to himself, I'm not shooting between the legs. Right. I'm not going to do it because the goalie's got to be expecting this.
Yeah.
Because he's seen me do it, all these other times. And he said, I got in and it was just there. And he just shot it between the legs again and we win the gold medal, right? But the thought process that goes through the athlete, right? Like they're even thinking, I don't want to do this, but I see that it's there.
Yeah.
I'm going to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Right. So completely unpre-planned.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, for me, that's where if you've got somebody who's got that level of awareness and ability, they're unstoppable, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
So it's as coaches, we're always trying to get convergent thinking with our players, right? Mm-hmm. Yet it's the players that think divergently that are the ones that everyone prizes, right?
Yeah,
so we're always trying to put the players in this box.
Yeah.
And yet it's the ones that can play outside the box that, right? So it's the beautiful thing about what we do as coaches is how do we let them flourish?
So she basically took it one side of the goaltender, brought it back and scooped it in with one hand, and that's her move. That's kind of her pre-planned move.
That's kind of her thing.
Wow.
She
had me fooled. It looked like it was totally on the fly.
Well, she even has a name for it. So, yeah.
I like it.
I think it was something called the oops, there it goes again or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
So, but
what's interesting about it, it's very deceptive, isn't it? And so as a result, you can imagine how it will more often than not work for her.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And it still takes a lot to do it.
Well,
under the pressure.
And that's really it is as coaches, do we allow our players to flourish in pressure situations? she obviously felt the freedom to do something like that in a gold medal hockey game. And that's a tribute back to, her coaches and how they work with their athletes and saying, you know what, you can do this. You have that freedom to take advantage of what you see. And, sometimes it's going to work out and sometimes it isn't.
Yeah. And
right?
she's had the opportunity to develop that move, as opposed to no one's come along and said, this is what you need to do. This will work.
That's right.
And I imagine, I could be wrong here, but I imagine as well, she would have the cues of the goalkeeper almost to the point where if the goalkeeper doesn't do what's expected, there's
an adjustment.
Yeah. Wow, interesting. Look, it's a really interesting game. I have to say, the dynamics of it are really fascinating to me in terms of the constant flow, the constant movement. It's actually something that I try and aspire to from a field hockey perspective, is to almost keep that level of flow. It should almost, and actually many of the moves and the kind of the running, flowing styles is I try and almost base on ice hockey in the sense of seeing players kind of making movements that are it feels as if they're on an ice, they're flowing, as opposed to not always looking for really, depends on the space of course, but not always looking for really sharp spaces. And so it's just interesting. There is an awful lot of similarities. There is an indoor version of field hockey. It's very, very similar. It's a 6-a-side version, and it's almost the same game.
There you go. Yeah.
We even play with a center and two, and it's the same game. The only difference is if the ball goes off the end, it goes off the end, doesn't stay in.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be better.
Out of bounds.
No
out of bounds for us, really.
Yeah.
There can be. You can throw the puck out over the glass or something, but for the most part, staying in the parameters. But it's and we even try and right now we're trying to get our coaches to think beyond those positions, right? Our game has evolved considerably in the last 10, 12 years. It's faster than it's ever been before. You got to think about the speed involved with skating. We've got players at the elite level, everyone's running around and can accelerate and skate faster than Usain Bolt can run his world record, 100-yard dash there, or 100-meter dash. So, the speeds involved are quite high.
Yeah.
And I don't know how the game of the future is actually going to be played because it keeps evolving. Yeah. But I can tell you that it's not going to get slower.
Yeah.
And the players aren't going to get less interchangeable.
Yeah.
So the skill sets required we want them to be able to solve problems in all kinds of situations.
Yeah.
And how are they going to do that unless we allow them to do those things in our training sessions?
It's hard though, isn't it? Because you have to kind of rid yourself of the idea of how the game, because the game I learned to play, the game that they're playing now is radically different from the game I learned to play. The techniques involved are radically different. And then, so therefore, it stands to reason, doesn't it, that the game that they're going to play in 10 years' time is going to be radically different from the game now. So there's absolutely no point for me teaching kids the techniques I learned when I was starting, because they're already out of date now. So by the time that they move into 10 years' time, so I just want to let them have the environment where they can create their own. For sure.
We're on the same path. Again, the evolution in our sport has been dramatic over the last 10, 15 years. Obviously, from a physiology side of things, the fitness level of our players, the strength, power levels have all gone through the roof because we're training in those capacities. But it comes back to what's going on, between their ears. That's the great differentiator right now. There are lots of players, and this is why you come back from a youth side. We've put players in a position to develop a certain skill sets. Like they can certainly skate like the wind. They can handle a puck, but they can't play. They can't think because we as coaches have over-scripted everything that we do. We've blocked all our training to an extent that we're not servicing our kids. And one, it's no fun. And two, we're not really giving them the tool set that they need to be able to play the game.
Yeah. I think that's the bit that so many sports have kind of missed is this idea of fundamentals and fundamental skills which actually means fundamental techniques, not skills.
Right.
And this idea that there are those, and they must be taught first, and then you can apply them to the game, is a completely, in my opinion, I used to go around saying that, by the way. I used to go and say it's the physical ability to do the technical stuff, and then the technical ability to do the tactical stuff in that order. I used to say that all the time.
Look, I mean, my graduate program, in coaching in 1990, that's look, I'm with you. We've all made those mistakes and we've all evolved, but if you have some awareness as a coach, and I don't know if this happens in field hockey, but and especially when you do get around some good players, you're saying to yourself on the bench during the game, you're seeing, now the bench is a bad spot to maybe sideline to view everything that's happening, but you're thinking to yourself as your player is coming up the rink with the puck, and you're going, oh, no, this doesn't look good. And then all of a sudden, fantastic. What a play. Right? And because I didn't see that. What did they see? And geez, well, they didn't get that maybe because of me. I'm trying to help my kids, help my athletes improve. Yet I don't think I really helped them there. So how did they figure that out? And well, maybe as a coach, I got to take a step back and evaluate what I'm doing that allows more of my players to be able to do that and less of that convergent thinking that we kind of box our players into.
Absolutely. I think that's for me, is one of the big missing links. It's one of the reasons I'm so kind of committed to a more what you might call ecological approach to coaching, because for me, what it does is it challenges me to create environments which are decision rich and give opportunity. I mean, for me, that's the thing I want young people to be able to develop. I want them to develop the ability to take on board information or become more attuned and aware of things around them, which then helps them to determine what a course of action might be. Right. And if you can give them that, you've almost given them all the tools they need, because they'll start to work it out.
That's right.
The bit is, if they haven't got if they're not aware of and so awareness is everything for me. If they're not aware of the various things around them, well, they haven't got anything to make a decision with. It's just guesswork. It's just, I'll choose this technique now. Oh, it worked. Great. No idea why. Oh, it didn't work. I still don't know why, but I'm going to have another go at it until eventually it works again. And that'll be proof that it's worth doing. And that's what I see a lot. I see a lot of players doing what I call doing moves.
Yes.
And they just do them and they do them, and it doesn't work. Now it worked. Great. I'm going to do it again because I know it works at least once.
Well, and this comes back to one of our, like I said before, our problems within our youth culture is we now have people out there that are saying, well, I'm going to teach you the Yzerman move or the Gretzky move or the whatever. And, well, that's not problem solving.
My little boy, he kind of said to me that, can you show me how to hit on the reverse? And I was like, no, that you can learn that when you're ready to learn that, or you can go out and work it out. You can go and work it out. And he begged me, and I sort of said, okay, I'll show you a few things. That was the worst mistake I ever made. I'll never do that again. Because he goes into a game and it's the only thing he wants to do, and he's doing it all the time, and he's doing it, and he's just like, if I'd have just allowed that to let him solve that problem when he was ready for it, it would have just been right. But no, I gave him that, and now he's just trying to. It's like, I'd never do that.
But it's hard though. Like, we as coaches, we want to help. We want, when our athletes or our kids come back to us and they ask us things, it's almost instinctive that we want to sometimes give them the answers, and that's the challenge for us is just when to shut up.
Yeah. Well, the question I ask, actually, if I do get asked that question again, is I say, why is it that you want to learn to do this? What is it in the game that you've identified that means that you need to be able to do this over and above anything else? And if they can give me a good answer to that, i.e. there is a genuine problem they're needing to solve, then we can explore the ways in which they might be able to perform the action. Yeah. But it has to be based on the problem, not the other way around.
Right. No, in agreement.
Hey, Ken, it's been a fantastic conversation. I'm glad we were able to do this.
Thanks so much for including me.
No. And I'm glad you reached out, because I just think there's I've actually got a few kind of games and activities that I've put together on some videos, so I'll flick them over to you.
That'd be much appreciated. Yeah. And I can do the same.
Okay, cool.
I have a few things that,
Yeah. I bet we can do a good learning exercise. You may have all the games I send you. It sounds to me like you might already have, but maybe there's a little spin on one or two that might work for you.
Sure,
cool.
For sure.
All right. Hey, all the best with what you're doing. I think I definitely feel like I've been on that journey with you a few times with the various sports I've worked with, and I know very many of the sports that I'm working with now. I mean, field hockey just rolled out their talent development framework. I don't know if you've seen that.
I've seen it. I think it's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, I love their golden thread idea. Again, we're watching to see and learn from others as well, and take in whatever information we possibly can and pass it along to our own kids. And terrific document. Love the videos involved, and you can see where that ecological framework is being woven into to what it is that they're doing, and I think that's just beautiful.
It's fascinating, and also what's really great about it for me is that, so for example, if I go to work with a coach, I use the golden thread as the reference point. Mm-hmm. So we come back and we'll always say, right, okay, so was that fun? Was there lots of touches of the ball? Was there lots of decisions to be made? Was there an element of stretch? And we can go through them all. And it's interesting how often, you might go, ooh, I had 2 of them, but I didn't have all of them. So it's a really good reference point around creating that environment.
And it's not so prescriptive that the coaches can figure out how to adapt, and that's coaching, right? It's the charges, the kids that are in front of you. How are we going to deal with them? And but if we follow along with some basic principles, our methods can all be different, but we're gonna help our kids. I'm writing
a practice design workshop as part of the new talent development framework stuff. So I'm going to be rolling that out with my other coach developers in the next month or so. So as that comes together, I'll flick the slides over to you and see if
that would be fantastic. Yeah, I would love that.
Okay, no worries. Hey, listen, if people are interested who are listening to this and want to find out more, want to get in touch and maybe throw a few questions, I'm assuming that's okay. How do they get in touch with you?
Twitter, it's Ken M Hockey.
Okay.
At Ken M Hockey. My email address, it's kenm@usahockey.org.
Okay.
Brilliant. Feel free.
Okay. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for a great conversation, and all the best with everything you do.
You as well, Stuart.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Equation podcast. If you like the show, then please consider supporting it by leaving a review on your favorite podcast player, telling your friends about it, or even becoming a hero and show your appreciation by becoming a patron. Just head over to thetalentaquation.co.uk and click on the Becoming a Patron button at the top of the page.
So there you have it. Great conversation with Ken there. Really enjoyed it. So great to hear some of the stuff those guys are doing over there. The work to get young people involved in that sport. It's a sport I would have loved to have played myself if I had absolutely any ability on skates. I have to make do with waddling around on a hockey pitch. But clearly having great effect, and more power to you. And there's a lot that people can learn from that. And it was also great to swap some ideas around different ways in which we can help kids develop their stick and movement skills, using and keeping perception and action coupled all the time by playing chasing games and working against others. So it just goes to show that lots of good things happening across the space. Just got back from the Movement and Skill Acquisition Ireland conference. Met some fantastic people. quite a lot of people who've been on the show, but so a lot of others as well. One of which was David Sharkey, who also came on board as a patron recently. David's doing some great work down in Oxfordshire with rugby, so thanks for your support, David. And also Michael Peregrine, a big shout out for you for coming on board as a supporter as well. You're most welcome as part of the community, and thank you for considering these conversations valuable enough for you on to show your support in that way. I'll be coming up with an episode in the near future with some reflections on the conference. Hopefully going to get a couple of the guys who were organising that to reflect with me. But in the meantime, I hope you have a great time with your coaching, and I'll see you next week.